there is an image almost everyone has in their head. A colossal bronze man, legs spread wide, standing over a harbor entrance, ships sailing beneath him like toys. It is one of the most famous mental pictures in ancient history. It is also almost certainly wrong. The real Colossus of Rhodes was still a giant, still a miracle of engineering, still a symbol of pride so loud it could be seen from miles away. But the truth is sharper than the fantasy. Because the Colossus did not become legendary only because it was tall, it became legendary because it was built at the exact moment a city proved it could not be broken. And then, just as the world accepted that this giant would stand forever, the earth reminded everyone who is truly in control. This is the Colossus of Rhodes, the fifth stop in our journey through the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Rhodes was not a quiet island. It sat in the eastern Mediterranean like a checkpoint, close to trade routes, close to rival powers, close to war. It was wealthy enough to matter, strategic enough to be threatened, and proud enough to become a target. In the years after Alexander the Great, the Mediterranean entered an era of shifting empires, kings carving the world into pieces, alliances forming and collapsing, cities forced to choose sides. Rhodes tried to survive with politics. But politics does not always stop armies. And one day, Rhodes faced a siege so extreme, it would define the island's identity for centuries. Because the Colossus was not built first. First came the threat. Then came the decision to turn survival into a monument. An invading force arrived under a commander whose reputation was practically a weapon. His name was Demetrius, often remembered with a title that translates to something like the besieger of cities. Rhodes was surrounded, attacked, pressured into surrender. And according to accounts, Demetrius brought machines built to terrify, siege engines, towers, and devices designed to climb walls like metal predators. One of these machines became famous in its own right, a massive siege tower, often described as an engineering monster. The name commonly associated with it translates to taker of cities. Whether every dimension given by later writers is perfectly accurate or not, the point is undeniable. Rhodes was facing industrial-scale warfare, ancient world style. And yet, Rhodes held. The siege failed. Demetrius withdrew. And when the invaders left, they did something that is almost poetic. They abandoned equipment. They left behind metal, machinery, and the remains of their own threat. Rhodes looked at that wreckage and saw an opportunity, not just to rebuild, to announce victory in a way no one could ignore. They would take the remains of war and turn them into a god. Rhodes had a patron deity who fit its identity perfectly, Helios the sun. Helios was not only a religious figure, he was branding, a symbol of light, visibility, endurance, dominance over horizons. If you wanted to declare, "We will not be conquered," you could build walls. Or you could build the sun's own image as a giant guardian over your coastline. That was the plan. A statue so large that every ship approaching Rhodes would see it first, before markets, before streets, before even the harbor itself. Not as decoration, as a warning, as a signature, as proof that the island had survived, and had the resources to celebrate survival on an absurd scale. Ancient tradition links the Colossus to a sculptor named Ceres of Lindos. Whether every detail about his process is perfectly preserved or not, the broader reality is clear. This project demanded more than artistry. It demanded structural thinking. Because a giant statue is not a statue first. It is a building disguised as a human form. It must resist wind. It must carry its own weight. It must endure salty air. And it must stand without modern steel, modern welding, or modern cranes. So, how do you do it? By treating it like engineered architecture, a strong internal framework, layered materials, careful weight distribution, and incremental construction, rising section by section. Later descriptions suggest the outer surface was bronze plates, fitted over an internal support system, with stone or other material used for stability. The precise construction details remain debated because the statue did not survive for us to inspect directly. But the basic engineering logic is not mysterious. You do not pour a giant into a mold. You build a giant like you build a tower. Slowly, methodically, and dangerously. And the time required tells you what kind of commitment Rhodes made. Accounts commonly say the project took over a decade, not a weekend of celebration. A generation-level statement. Now we have to talk about the famous image again, the statue straddling the harbor entrance with ships passing between its legs. It is cinematic. It is unforgettable. It is also a structural nightmare. A statue positioned like that would have required massive support points on both sides of the harbor, extreme rigidity, and resistance to vibration and wind loads on a coastline in a seismically active region. More importantly, practical harbor traffic would have been disrupted for years during construction. So what is the more plausible interpretation? Many historians and engineers argue the Colossus likely stood near the harbor close enough to dominate the skyline without physically spanning the water. In other words, it guarded the port symbolically, not mechanically. A giant placed on solid ground, possibly on a raised base, positioned for maximum visibility to ships approaching Rhodes. That still delivers the same psychological effect. A city announcing itself through a god of bronze and sunlight. The myth of ships sailing under the legs appears strongly in later imagination and artwork, which may reflect storytelling more than reality. And this matters because it teaches you something important about wonders. A wonder does not need to be exaggerated to be impressive. The truth is already enough. Ancient sources commonly describe the Colossus as roughly 70 cubits tall, often translated into a height in the range of about 30 meters, not counting the base. Numbers from antiquity should always be treated cautiously. Measurements travel through manuscripts, translations, and retellings. But again, the exact centimeter is not the point. The point is scale. A bronze figure comparable to a modern multi-story building, made in a world without modern manufacturing. Even if the number is slightly off, the achievement remains outrageous. And the statue's fame spread fast. Travelers talked. Sailors described it. Writers used it as shorthand for unbelievable. Rhodes had done it. They built a giant. And then the world did what it always does. It began to assume the giant would last forever. The Colossus did not fall to an army. It did not fall to fire. It did not fall to theft. It fell to something no city can negotiate with: an earthquake. Accounts say the statue broke at the knees and collapsed. Imagine that moment. A symbol of invincibility snapping like a tool. A god reduced to scattered bronze. And here is what makes the story even more haunting. The fallen Colossus reportedly remained on the ground for centuries. Not hidden, not removed. Just lying there, massive fragments that people traveled to see, even in ruin. Because even broken, it was still a wonder. There is a brutal honesty in that. Rhodes built a giant to celebrate survival. Then nature reminded Rhodes that survival is temporary and pride is fragile. And yet Rhodes did not stop being Rhodes. The island remained a player. Trade continued. Life continued. The wonder was gone, but the city endured. Which raises the next question. Why didn't they rebuild it? One explanation that appears in later tradition is that an oracle warned against rebuilding. Whether that specific detail is literal truth or later storytelling, the broader logic is easy to understand. Rebuilding would have been expensive. It would have required enormous resources and time. And it would have invited the same risk again, another earthquake, another collapse. Sometimes, after a catastrophe, a society makes a quiet decision. We will remember this, but we will not repeat it. So the Colossus became something rare, a wonder that achieved immortality not through survival, but through its fall. Because the story of a giant that collapsed is more emotionally powerful than the story of a giant that simply stood. At some point, the remnants vanished. Later accounts claim the bronze was eventually removed and sold off, transported away in massive quantities. This part of the story is often repeated, but the details are difficult to confirm with absolute certainty. What is certain is the pattern. When a fallen monument is made of valuable material, history rarely leaves it alone. Bronze is wealth. Wealth invites extraction. So, whether it was sold in one dramatic episode or dismantled gradually over time, the end result is the same. The Colossus did not survive as an object. It survived as a reputation, as a symbol, as a warning. The Colossus of Rhodes was never just a statue. It was a victory announcement, a psychological weapon, a city's refusal to be intimidated cast into metal. And its collapse turned it into something even more universal, a reminder that human greatness can be real and still be temporary. Now I want your answer to a simple question. If you lived in Rhodes after the earthquake, would you rebuild the Colossus? Or would you leave it fallen, as proof that even gods can break? Write your view in the comments. I read them, and I will highlight the strongest arguments. And if you are following this series, subscribe and turn on notifications, because next, we move from a giant of bronze to a giant of stone and firepower. Next episode, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Until then, stay curious.